Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to our workshop. I would encourage you to go to the U.S. Payments Forum website and download this white paper. It was really a lot of work to develop it. It actually took us about a year to write it. So the piece that I'm talking to you about now is how we classified the different types of mobile wallets. So actually we struggled with this for a while, and what is some logical kind of grouping that we can use to talk about the differences between the wallets, and this is the categorization that we came up with. So in the white paper, we took as broad a perspective as possible. We did say anything that's initiated from a mobile device, but we also considered what you might call digital wallets, and that might be something like Amazon Pay. You know, it can also be used online without a mobile. We looked at digital and mobile wallets that can be, transactions can be enabled from a mobile device. And we looked at proximity, so that's in-person POS payments, online, in-app. And the 5 basic models that we came up with are these, and I'm going to describe each one. So there are 2 that are called device-centric mobile wallets. One is for proximity and one is for in-app. And as the name implies, device-centric, it's actually integrally tied to the device. So Apple Pay only works with an Apple device. And then you have, what's it called now? Android Pay, that keep changing their name, or Samsung Pay. So those are the 3 examples of device-centric. So they're all operating system specific, and they require specific financial institution enablement. So in other words, your bank or credit union has to have an arrangement in order to provision your payment credential into the wallet. And these work both for proximity and in-app payments. So in the case of proximity, the tokenized payment credentials are stored in the mobile device or in the cloud. So there are differences, as you probably know, in a mobile phone has what's called a secure element, which is the most secure part of the phone. If you want something that's unbreakable, you can store it in the secure element. So in the case of Apple Pay, the credential is stored in that secure element. Now, Mina talked before about soft card. Soft card was in the case where the credentials are going to be provisioned through the mobile network operator because they have control over access to the secure element. Well, this caused an impasse in the industry because the banks didn't want to pay the mobile network operators for access to the secure element. And so a few years ago, somebody came up with kind of a workaround called host card emulation, which is a cloud-based solution. So it bypasses the use of the secure element in the Android phones and stores the credential in the cloud. HCE is what it's called. It's not quite as secure as a secure element, but Marianne, who is next, will talk about some of the ways that techniques that have been used to make HCE as secure or nearly as secure as a secure element. So the POS interacts with the mobile device by a tap or magnetic transmission. So I'll talk about MST, which is a different case, only applies to Samsung Pay. And as I said, it's enabled through explicit permission from the bank, who performs identity verification. If you've provisioned a card in one of these types of mobile wallets, you've seen how this works. They might send you an out-of-band text message or something like that, or in some cases you actually have to call the bank in order to complete the enrollment. We consider this to be an open wallet since it will accept any card from a participating bank, and it works at any merchant if they have the NFC reader, or in the case of Samsung, any merchant who accepts cards. The in-app is just slightly different. It's still a tokenized payment credential stored in the cloud or in the secure element. And it works with mobile apps, so you have that Pay button, Apple Pay button inside of a mobile app. And again, it's explicit permission from the financial institution. So the QR code wallets are typically closed wallets, just like we were talking before about Starbucks. and they are cloud-based and device agnostic. So these will work, it's an app that will work on any phone. It uses QR codes to complete a purchase at point of sale, or maybe to authorize a fuel pump. And it can be a merchant. We have one example of an FI brand. There may be more, but Chase Pay is one pretty prominent example of an FI branded QR code wallet. And with the exception of Chase, it's usually closed loop, so only works at specific merchants. Okay, and then the final two examples are, this is kind of a mouthful, card-not-present, card-on-file wallets, and digital checkout wallets. So in the case of the card-not-present, card-on-file wallet, the credentials are stored by a merchant or a payment service provider so that you can do repeated or automatic card-not-present payments, mobile app or in a browser, without re-entering your credentials every time. So you're pretty familiar with that. It's kind of like Amazon Pay, actually. And it can be used by single or multiple merchants. So if you think of PayPal also is like this. PayPal is usable at multiple merchants. And usually the merchants would integrate a PSP wallet provider via an API. And these wallets are also device agnostic, and they're considered open since they accept any kind of card. And even broader than the other examples, you can put prepaid cards, gift cards, you can use ACH or store cards, and usable at any participating merchant. And it does require a consumer to enroll a payment method, and sometimes to create an account. Digital checkout wallets, the examples here are MasterPass and Visa Checkout, and then American Express has, I forget what theirs is called, we'll get to that in a minute. It enables card-not-present purchases without the need to re-enter your payment credentials, or in some cases your shipping address, so it pre-populates. The intent here is to make transactions easier to do. And it's offered by the payment networks to both banks, financial institutions, and to merchants. And it can be accessed through the bank's mobile app or website in some cases, and in some cases the bank might pre-enroll you using the cards that you have with them, or it can be added to a merchant browser app or app in checkout. It optionally uses tokenization, and as I mentioned, automatic enrollment, and it supports both web browser and in-app payments for card-not-present purchases. And in one case, I think it's MasterPass, has plans to introduce it at point of sale also. Okay, so in this section of the white paper, we went into a lot of design choices which fall into these categories. So the interaction method, so NFC, QR code, or MST, and I'll explain that in a second. The storage of payment credentials, as I mentioned, either secure element, host card emulation, HCE, or card on file, where it's in the cloud. And then payment options, so proximity at in person, in-app, or remote, which is e-commerce, m-commerce, browser. An acceptance mode, this is important to merchants because it affects the cost of payment acceptance. So in some cases, it's considered card present because the device is present. And that applies to Apple Pay and Android Pay and Samsung Pay for proximity face-to-face transactions only. It's treated the same as a physical card being used. In all the other cases that we talked about, they're treated as card-not-present transactions, which has an impact on the cost. And this is a bit esoteric at this point because we don't have any staged wallets right now. But when the original Google wallet came out 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know if you ever used it, but if you recall, the way it worked was it had a MasterCard as the payment card. And then it was funded actually by other cards in the background. So it was like 2 cards. You use your Visa from Chase, but it would fund the MasterCard, which is used for the transaction. And the reasons they did that was because of business model. So that's called a staged wallet. And I don't believe we have any of those right now. You might think of Starbucks like that, but the card they're using is actually a prepaid gift card, and it's being funded by another card. So all the other ones are pass-through wallets, which means the card being used at the point of sale is actually the funding card. And then push versus pull. The difference here is that credit cards are considered pull payments, so you give the merchant permission to pull money from your account, and you have to provide your banking credentials, then your credit card number. If you think of Zelle or Venmo, those are push payments. So you send money to somebody using a destination identifier like their email or their telephone, so that's a push payment. And the advantage of that is that you don't have to disclose your credentials or your account information. But none of the wallets that we're talking about later here are using push. And then PAN versus token. If you don't know, PAN stands for primary account number, so that's your credit card number in the clear. And we're moving toward tokenization as a solution to help with security, which Marianne will talk a lot more about. Okay, then we get into hybrid. So Mina talked before about bank-centric, merchant-centric, and they fall into the original 5 categories, but bank-centric is a device-centric mobile proximity wallet, and the reason for a bank to do that would be to have a holistic banking experience. So you could actually embed the wallet functionality into the bank's mobile app, and typically it would be NFC only on Android because Apple prevents anybody from accessing its secure element. So nobody is able to do NFC on Apple phones, except Apple Pay. So if a bank was to do this on Apple, it would have to be a QR code wallet, which is what Chase Pay has done. And it would be using HCE on Android and in-store and optionally card-not-present transactions. So then what we call the mobile network operator-centric, that's the failed soft card model. We don't have any MNO-centric wallets right now, but in that model, the secure element of any phone would be provisioned by the mobile operator, and presumably they would charge money for that service to the bank, the issuer, in order to have space on the secure element. So all of these would have been NFC using the secure element and would have supported in-store and offline or remote transactions or in-app. And then we have the wallet proprietary to the handset, so that's Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, et cetera. And the intent there is to have really deep integration with the handset, and you can do things that improve the customer experience, like ability to access the wallet from the lock screen without having to enter a PIN, and having a really good user experience, what we call the gold standard of user experience. So these are using NFC and MST, and I forgot I was going to skip forward. Let me just skip for a second. I should have put this slide before. So as a description of the 2 interaction methods, so NFC, you probably know this, but it's a standards-based protocol based on radio frequency technology that sends data between devices at a very short proximity, a couple of centimeters. That's why we call it TAP. And it's exactly the same standard as is used by contactless cards. And as a matter of fact, on a phone, there's 3 modes for NFC, and this mode is called card emulation mode, if I'm not mistaken. The other modes are to read or also to write, but this is card emulation mode, so it works exactly the same as a card. So Samsung bought a company that has a proprietary technology called MST, magnetic stripe transmission, and what it does is very clever. It fools the mag stripe POS at the merchant into thinking that a mag stripe has been swiped, because very clever. It works in almost every case. There's just a couple of cases that might not work, I think maybe at fuel pumps because you can't get to the mag stripe reader. But this, in theory, ensures that Samsung Pay wallets are usable practically any merchant. So let me go back then. So we were talking about the middle one there, the wallet proprietary to the handset. So NFC, MST, and it can be secure element or the cloud credentials using HCE, in-store and in-app. Then merchant-centric, or PSP, which is like Amazon Pay, is a wallet provided by a merchant or a payment service provider that can be funded with a credit card or a private label or ACH or gift cards, I guess. And in the case of the merchant, usually it's integrated with a loyalty program, and the merchant also has the opportunity to optimize its cost of payment acceptance by prioritizing payment methods that cost them less. And it can support other features like faster checkout, so it's a whole holistic shopping experience that we'll hear a lot more about from Laura. And almost all of these are QR code based and would work in-store, in-app. And then finally, the payment network centric are the digital checkout wallets, and their aim is to make m-commerce easier, so you don't have to keep typing a bunch of stuff in. It enables others to build their own branded wallet, and they're using NFC or QR code, cloud credentials, and mostly in-app and m-commerce. Okay. So this is the transaction flow, and even though we have a difference in the secure element and HCE between Apple Pay, Android Pay, and Samsung Pay, still the transaction flow is the same. And actually, I believe Marianne is going to use one or more of these diagrams too to talk about security. So you'll see this diagram again. So it goes from your NFC-enabled phone waved at an NFC reader, which creates a payment token and a cryptogram. So what that's representing is this is actually creating an EMV payment token, because of the cryptogram. It goes to the acquirer, which is passed on to the network. The network recognizes that this is a token. It has to be de-tokenized, so it's sent to the token service provider, which sends then the encrypted PAN, the card number, to the issuer, who processes the authorization and returns back the same route. And this is also for those three, Apple Pay, Android Pay, and Samsung Pay, for in-app transactions. So you would authorize a payment inside of the merchant app using Touch ID or Select Buy with Android Pay. And it sends tokenized credentials, again the same, it's an EMV payment token, sent to the merchant app, to the acquirer processor, to the payment network, who de-tokenizes it, sends the encrypted PAN to the issuer, and then back. And in this case, you're not dealing with the POS, so a confirmation message is sent back to the mobile phone that started the transaction. And in this case, the billing information may also be passed. Okay, now we talk about two types of cloud-based wallets. And they are developed by merchants and PSPs. So they store payment credentials on the cloud instead of on the mobile device. To use these apps, you have to have connectivity via cell or Wi-Fi. And the merchant-centric offers additional flexibility, like different payment options, loyalty, and device. They are device agnostic. It requires consumers to download the app and enter email and credentials and subscribe. So the first one is the payment network-centric digital checkout wallets. So this is MasterCard and Visa working directly with banks. American Express also offers this, but I believe it's only for their own cards. The Visa and MasterCard ones accept any card, so they're not limiting themselves just to their own Visa or their own MasterCards. And there's 3 ways to enroll. It could be through your mobile, your bank's mobile app, or online banking. Online, it can be through like Visa or MasterCard or Amex provider-hosted site, or as part of your first purchase. So if you go into an app, it might say pay with MasterPass, and you can enroll right there. Each transaction requires you to log in, which I think is kind of a problem. If it's not done with Face ID or Touch ID, they have to enter a PIN each time is a bit of an issue, but you log in. So the way it works is that you push, pay with MasterPass. It passes a token to the acquirer, to the network, to the TSP, which then sends the token and the PAN to the issuer, and then it comes back the same way and results in a confirmation message. And then the last one is the QR code-based wallet, and that are done by merchants. And it's considered, as we were talking about before, easier or more ubiquitous to implement versus NFC, because you don't have to have NFC readers. It uses standard scanners, which a lot of merchants already have, and it works on any phone and any payment type, including gift cards and ACH and prepaid cards. So there's two versions of this: consumer-presented QR code or merchant-presented. And consumer-presented is the way that Chase Pay works. So this example here is how Chase Pay does it. So the consumer scans, and also Starbucks works this way. So you get a QR code on your phone through the app, and you scan it at the merchant's scanner. The QR code was previously downloaded and stored in the mobile wallet. And in some cases, I'm not sure about Starbucks, but with Chase, it's a one-time dynamic QR code. So, you know, theoretically, if it wasn't dynamic, you could take a picture of the, or, you know, a screenshot of the QR code and reuse it and commit fraud that way. So optionally, it's a tokenized credential, and optionally automatic enrollment. So in the case of Chase Pay, I believe you are automatically enrolled if you have a Chase card of some kind. And in Chase Pay, you can also pay with points at the point of sale. I just looked at my Chase Pay app last night, and it said I had $200 I could spend, so that's good. I should spend that. And you can use it in-store, in a mobile app, at a fuel pump. But to use it in-store, if it's QR code based, I believe Chase would have had to like recruit all these merchants in order to. It's, you know, it's not, there's no standardization on QR codes yet, so it requires deals with each merchant. And by the way, there is a movement afoot by EMV and maybe some other groups to have standardization in QR codes for at point of sale. I think they're launching it in India, so that you wouldn't have to make arrangements with every merchant. Everyone would just agree to this use of QR code standard. I'm seeing heads nodded. Have you used it in India? Which one? Not yet. Okay. Okay, then the other one is the merchant-presented QR code, which is the way Walmart Pay works. So the consumer scans a code. I guess you'd have to launch your Walmart Pay app. You scan the QR code at the point of sale with your camera. And the mobile app uses the merchant info to initiate the payment. But if you think about it, it's sending something up to Walmart's cloud. It's not doing any interaction really between the phone and the point of sale. So there's no credentials stored in the phone, and nothing is passed to the merchant's POS terminal in that case. So that is the way, with much struggle and analysis, we came up with how to characterize all the different models. Any questions? Yes?
On the last one where you gave those specific stores as an example, would that be analogous to a store-issued credit card? Only this is obviously electronic pay, because you said it didn't go through the normal system.
For Walmart Pay? And you can put any payment credential in there. You could use, I don't think Walmart has a store card, but if they did, they could use that, but it could also use Visa and MasterCard.
Well, so are they, I guess I don't understand. You saw the links for everybody else, and you said Walmart, it just goes up to their cloud.
Right, so they have a card on file, so your credentials are already stored in their cloud when you enroll in the system. That's why they don't have to pass anything between the phone and the POS.
So it acts a little bit like a stage, because you go and initiate the transaction with Walmart, and then they pass it on to the card that backs up the transaction.
It would be almost like if you were using Amazon Pay at some store. I don't know if you can do that. I know they're probably going that direction. Or even iTunes or something, because all the credentials would be stored in the cloud, and the interaction would be happening up there and not at the point of sale. Yes?
How many more QR code standards for the U.S.?
What was that again?
QR code standards for the U.S.?
Yes?
Can you provide more comments? Or?
Yeah, in the white paper we have a link to the EMV Co specifications on it. Yes?
What's the name of the white paper on U.S. payments?
It's called Mobile wallet, mobile and digital wallet landscape. It was published in January. Yes. Well, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? In my humble opinion, I think probably the Apple Pay, Android Pay, Samsung Pay. But as Starbucks has shown, if it's some place you go a lot, and you wouldn't mind having another app that you just use for Starbucks. And by the way, interesting about Starbucks, they showed when they first launched the app quite a while ago, maybe 5 years ago, they had kind of tepid adoption, and it wasn't until they tied it with loyalty, they had a big jump to like 15% usage. And when they added order ahead, they got another big jump to like 30%. I think it's probably even higher than 30 now. So I would think maybe Walmart Pay could, get some adoption. I'm sure people who shop frequently at Walmart would find it compelling. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I think the thing we should be solving for is customer experience. And you'll hear a lot more about that from Laura. So in the Walmart Pay, I think they have Scan and Go. It only works at Sam's Club, so then you can skip the checkout line. That would be pretty awesome, right? So it's not about the payment, it's more about shopping and the whole customer experience. But of course, you do have to solve the ecosystem problems behind the scenes, but that shouldn't subsume anything about, improving customer experience. Okay, thank you. Thank you. By the way, I didn't mention before, Paygility Advisors is maybe obvious from the name. It's a consultancy around payments and fintech. Yes. Well, yeah. 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 So why wouldn't they become a bank? Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know so much about Samsung, but certainly the industry is shaking in its boots, thinking that Apple or Google might try to become a bank. So, yeah. Interesting, Samsung, out of its own pocket, funded a lot of loyalty programs to drive adoption, and they're not really making money directly from the wallet. Maybe they're just trying to push engagement, but you get points if you use it once a week or twice a week, and you can get gold status depending on how much you used it. So they've been dramatically, pushing adoption, but the players that have been more thought of as leveraging data is more Google. That's their modus operandi. Yes?
I'm wondering if you look at crypto wallets at all, and this kind of taxonomy overlays onto.
Well, in the white paper, we had 3 or 4 other categories besides merchant-centric, bank-centric. We also looked at we just said P2P and invisible and alternative rails, so that would fall into the category of, but we just classified them. We didn't really go into more detail about them. Yes?
So merchants considering wallets, what strategies do you have?
Getting what? God. Well, that is outside the scope of this paper. In fact, at the U.S. Payments Forum, we have a lawyer that sits with us all the time, and if we brought that up, he would say, can't talk about that. But probably the merchant advisory group is thinking about that. I don't know. Yes.
What about, you know, I guess Apple Pay and Samsung Pay, they have like robust provisioning, that's really good, right? Obviously, like card present, right? Can merchants work with financial institutions to mimic that type of provisioning?
So you asked the question, yeah. I think the other thing you keep in mind too, when you talk about Apple Pay, that's only in the NFC.
Yeah, but in store, yeah. For merchants trying to solve in-store checkout.
So you're saying a merchant creates, and so Walmart Pay for on Android, they provision into using HCE. I don't know if they would.
CardNotPresent fraud is growing,
Mhm.
and obviously it's slowing down with EMV in-store. But you introduce a wallet that now lets CardNotPresent fraud sneak into the store, right? So, you know, stuff like Walmart, I'm just kind of thinking for, you know, companies like Walmart who allow bank cards to go onto their wallet and transact in the store. What are they thinking in terms of fraud? Start up a provision, do they have it somewhere else?
It's two different questions. So remember when the Apple Pay first came out, there was a little bit of a scandal because the ID&V didn't work properly and some people committed a little bit of fraud. They kind of closed those up. So ID&V is at enrollment, but then the CNP fraud is a result of compromising the credentials that are stored in the cloud. And so the approaches to solve that problem would be tokenizing those credentials so they're not accessible.
Right. Tokenize it to prevent if somebody's taking a card. I'm saying if I have 1,000 cards, right, you know, that I just bought from our website, right, and I'm ready to provision it all into my Walmart Pay, go to the store, and start checking out what I want, right? Where's that sort of, have merchants found the solutions? Is Walmart thinking about things like that?
In general, I just had an event about this last week. So I see that's no more different than any CNP fraud. So there are a lot of, well, there's 3D Secure 2.0, which is coming, but what most merchants now are using artificial intelligence and other big data techniques to detect patterns. I don't know, Laura, you have any other comments on that?
I think you're specifically about the provisioning, like the enrollment and provisioning process today.
Sure.
You know, merchants don't have that capability like the issuing banks do, to do like an Apple Pay provision. And we would love to be able to do that. So you know, if there's nobody that I'm aware of is doing it today, but that is a gap in the industry that I think these proprietary products or product file, products should be able to leverage. They're different than traditional bank leverages. So it's a gap, but it's very apparent to the merchants that it's a gap, and we need to try to evolve the industry towards solving for it. But
Yeah, I think that's top of mind for a couple of
Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned MST.
Yes.
That's how it was about MST. That's technology that can help merchants to create their own wallets, which is not MST technology, and that it's to take QR code or something like that to tap into card present market.
So the question is, can merchants use QR codes to get card present rates?
Can merchants that currently can only do QR code because there is no technology to just the first devices, can we tap into the card present market using MST?
Okay, well, Samsung bought that technology, so only if they would license, I mean, maybe they would, but right now they've tied it up for themselves.
But if it would be one way.
Yeah, that's true.
the technology is completely different. So barcode is going to be accepted by completely different technology than MST, which is based on a traditional device, versus
she's saying, though, maybe somebody comes out with something that, like MST, could they sell that to merchants? And then you would, yeah, that's a good idea, good point, although we're leveraging last century's technology. But, you know. By the way, well, we'll get into this, but the MST is more secure than real magstripe because it is tokenized. Yes?
From the perspective of a financial institution, do you have any recommendations for accelerating time to market with partnering and onboarding new opportunities, new wallets and such, or develop common processes and such to onboard?
So the question is, can we think of any ways to accelerate the introduction of new wallets?
So from the perspective of the financial institution backing, partnering with new retail wallets, for example, do you have any recommendations on accelerating time to market?
Join the U.S. Payments Forum? No, in all seriousness, it's a pretty unique group that has all the ecosystems players. It used to be involved in the Smart Card Alliance, which now has been rebranded as the Secure Technology Alliance, and we always tried to get merchants, and merchants wouldn't come, but it's really worked well with the U.S. Payments Forum.
Do you partner with similar groups outside the U.S. because I just support area outside?
Well, I can't think of anything outside the U.S., no.
Do you have still kind of general recommendations as to why emerging economies?
Well, in a lot of other countries, they have payment councils. I don't know if merchants are involved or not, but they do a better job than the U.S. on collaborating on payments because there's fewer players. Like in Canada, Australia, and the UK, they each have payment groups that help set direction and commonality and among the ecosystem. Any more questions? Yes.
So, do you expect any international wallets to really disrupt market here?
Any what?
International apps?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but how about LePay?
What's the expectations?
Well, LePay is doing something right because they keep engagement in by, I think, combining with social aspects a little bit like Venmo. So that might be a disruptor. I can't think of any others. There's Repay in India, but I don't know if they'd have any aspirations of coming to the U.S.
What you're seeing in the U.S., last question, sorry.
Yeah.
You are seeing in the U.S. that the merchants are being they're allocated aggressively on towards the merchants to gain acceptance, really primarily for their Chinese consumers today. But I can't imagine over time that won't shift their strategy in some way to, they probably have to leverage some sort of relationship with a provider in the U.S. Given that kind of unique structure. But I can't imagine they wouldn't stop there. So I nobody has, future crystal ball, but I suspect they'll become more of a bigger player down the road. But to your point, they add a huge amount of additional value-added services beyond the payment, and that's what's really compelling for the consumer. And so I can't imagine a Chinese consumer being very different than a U.S. consumer in that way. So anything you can do to wrap that around.
And I think they partnered with Discover. Yeah. I think they partnered with Discover because most of them are China UnionPay cards, and that's how they got acceptance. And yeah, the other thing, talk about monetizing data. I read an absolutely terrifying scenario. They're doing social scores in China. That's not Alipay, it's the government. And they've actually prevented some people from getting on an airplane because I don't know what the hell they did. They talked about Tiananmen Square or something. But the scenario was all the data that Alipay has, because they bought all these companies. They bought the ride share, they bought this, they bought that. So they know you got on a bike and you went to this grocery store and they know what you bought. Wow.
That's a good point on the regulatory side of the coin, because regulators, U.S. Treasury, and all of the different governmental, I want to say oversight, going to have a tremendous amount of say-so when there's a disruption that becomes problematic. innovations are happening, but there's going to be a reckoning to that oversight forthcoming, and it won't be kind of long.
Right.
So that's another
Well,
thing to oversight.
thank you for all the fantastic questions.